Welcome. My name is Karen Wolfe, and I'll be your host for this edition of Politically Speaking. This is a Rogers TV program that engages our community leaders around issues that are important and matter to you. Now, we're going into the third year of this pandemic, and I just want to remind you that Rogers is continuing to address the safety and the health of their staff and their guests by using Zoom technology, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So first of all, Georgina collects a lot of money every year in property taxes, and a good portion of that money actually goes to York Region. And so what we want to do today is explore the relationship we have with York Region, and one of the ways we're going to do that is we've invited our regional councillor, Rob Grossi, to the show. Now, Mr. Grossi has had 24 years of experience as a local politician, 21 years actually sitting around the table at York Region, 17 as our mayor, and for the last 4 years actually as our regional councillor. So at this time, I would like to welcome Rob Grossi to the show. Rob, thank you so much for being with us, and welcome.
Hey, Karen, great to see you. How are you?
Oh, good. Always good.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to see you guys. Great to be with Roger.
You know, Rob, when I was preparing for this program, I realized that we really don't spend a lot of time thinking about York Region as a significant level of government. You know, I think we spend a lot of time talking about policies at the municipal level, the federal level, and the provincial level. But, the truth is that York Region policies really do have an impact on how we grow as a community here. So maybe we can talk about, their official plan and the impact that it has on us.
Yeah, great question. York Region, a lot of people don't realize it's a multi-billion-dollar budget between the capital and the operating expenses of the region of York. The region itself and its budget is bigger than probably four provinces in the country. So we rank up there, fairly large. One of the biggest projects in the next few years will be the extension of the subway into York Region in the Richmond Hill area. That's a multi-billion-dollar project itself. So, yeah, York Region has a lot of diversity between its rural areas and its urban areas. And that's what probably makes it difficult to be a regional councillor in that you should envelop all of the interest, not only within your own community, but within the region, and look at how it interacts and the way it affects local communities as well as the regional community.
And I mean, when we're looking at official plans, Georgina's official plan actually has to be in keeping with York Region's official plan, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I've always found it interesting because whether it's the Planning Act, the Municipal Act, or official plans, people would always say, well, I want to come to Georgina because I want to have a great big piece of property and I want to live in a rural environment. Yet all of the rules and regulations are the same that exist in more urban areas to the south of us. And, the cost of development, the cost of servicing, and the development charges related to that development regionally are the same. So, when it comes to providing those kinds of services and talking about the region itself, it's, you may come up to the town of Georgina, but if you're moving into a subdivision in Keswick, it's not much different than a subdivision you might find in Richmond Hill or Mississauga or Whitby or anywhere else, because you're under the same guise of the Planning Act and the Municipal Act that you deal with in other areas within the Greater Toronto area pretty well.
All right, so to start us off here, Georgina is going to collect approximately $113 million in the 2022 budget. Now, I understand 52 cents of every dollar we collect stays here in Georgina. We're going to send 13 cents of every dollar off to the province for the education board or school boards, and 33 cents then will go to the region. So what I want to do is talk about some of the services that money is paying for that we get back from the region. So
sure.
I know there's a number of them. Maybe we go through a few of them here.
Okay.
So how about police services?
Well, so policing in general is a very expensive proposition, but we require it in in our society. And to be honest, I think as far as 3 District and Northern York Region and the kind of services we get a great service from York Regional Police. We've provided them with the tools and the technology to do a first-class job. And in my experience over my 24 years, personally as well, I've received great service from York Regional Police. So I don't, I know it's expensive, but like anything else, if you want a quality service, you have to pay for it. So I don't have any problem with the amount of service and the cost of the service. It does get costly, and but you're dealing with unions, you're dealing with needs within communities, and I think a lot of those needs have been addressed over the course of at least my 24 years.
All right, water treatment.
Well, probably, it's interesting. Every election I've gone to, and I've been involved with, including provincial and federal elections, one of the key areas of concern in the town of Georgina is Lake Simcoe. No matter what you want to talk about, you can talk about development, you can talk about transportation. It always comes back to the health of our lake and the interaction between this community and the 53 kilometers of shoreline, which makes up, I think it's 53 kilometers of shoreline on Lake Simcoe. And, I've always believed that the cost of water, yes, it's expensive. At least people believe it's expensive, but relative to the cost of water in other places in the world, water essentially in Canada is a commodity because we have a large commodity. It's not cheap, but it's not as expensive as it is elsewhere. But it's it's like garbage. Remember when we put a bag tag on garbage? We made people identify that there's a cost associated with waste management. Same with water. York Region doesn't go down to Lake Ontario. We're lucky that we're on the shores of Lake Simcoe, but to get our water, we get a lot of our water for York Region from Peel, and a lot of our wastewater goes to Durham Region through Duffin Creek. And there's a cost associated with that's brought back to the constituents, including the capital costs. Capital costs for water and wastewater are huge, as you know.
Okay, how about roads?
So, roads. We need the Bradford bypass. I'll get that out of the way to begin with.
We're going to come to that, okay?
Okay. Roads. It's interesting because I remember when we had Woodbine and we negotiated with the region to have Woodbine widened to 4 lanes. And at the time it was widened to 4 lanes, there was no development of any major recourse on Woodbine Avenue. Yet we managed to convince, and when I say we, I'll include former regional councillor Danny Wheeler, the late Danny Wheeler, and myself and others who served in the region, to convince the region of York that we needed some improved infrastructure in the northern part of York Region. At the same time, they were doing huge developments in Markham and Vaughan, Teston Road, places like that. They were surviving with these developments on a 2-lane roadway. So, we need that infrastructure. We continually need that infrastructure until someone finds a way that we can travel from the town of Georgina to Toronto without using a vehicle. We're going to need enhancements to the road. I realize that it becomes a challenge. There's a cost associated with the road infrastructure, but on balance, I think our roads are in decent shape regionally. A lot of people don't realize the balance between regional roads and town roads, but for the most part, and just a shout out at the same time to all the guys that maintain our roads when it comes to snow plowing and everything else. They do a fabulous job. I often hear from people who say, gee, I woke up, I got out my driveway, it was fabulous on local roads, and then I got into other roads and they weren't as good as the local roads. So I think that's a testament to the kind of service we get from our guys.
All right, let's look at ambulance.
Well, Paramedic Services, I'll be honest, I've questioned whether tiered response And tiered response is where you make a phone call for emergency services and you get a response from 3 services: police, fire, and ambulance. And I've wondered whether tiered response works the way it should. Certainly everybody wants the best service that they possibly can. And a lot of that has to do with dispatch and how dispatch works. I think we get a great service. A few years ago, I remember seeing a presentation by York Region paramedics and how they move ambulances around. So it isn't just based on the station; it's based on the call. So, for example, if there's numerous calls in Keswick that require the services of ambulances there, the Sutton ambulance might not necessarily stay in the station there. They may shift it over to Baseline and Woodbine, so it's on call, because you want to be within a certain parameter of minutes to be able to respond to a call. So I think, overall, we get a pretty good service out of the ambulance service as well, paramedics.
Okay. Social services. I know that, York Region pretty much carries the ball around social services in Georgina.
A lot of it is flow-through dollars from the province of Ontario to supply the needed services, whether it's dental screening or anything else. And I think that we're starting to see a better show locally with facilities like the Link and the partnerships that are there that bring those services closer to the community. It used to be they'd make an announcement at the province of Ontario that they're investing money in the northern part of York Region. And they would say, and I'd say, well, where exactly? They said, well, Aurora. And I'd say, well, you have no idea where the northern part of York Region is if you think that Aurora is the northern part of York Region. So I think over the course of time, kudos to the people that have been involved. I think our services are much better in the town of Georgina than they were years ago, and that's just it's the work done by others and maybe a little bit.
Right. Okay, so you did pass a York Region budget for 2022 of $3.7 billion, and that represents a 2.9% increase over last year. So I'm just wondering, what was the discussion / reaction like around the table when staff unveiled that budget?
Well, there was some angst simply because of the pandemic and the effect that it would have on our constituents. Our ratio of that is substantially less than what it is in Markham or Vaughan, just because of the total amount of assessment. You hate to have to raise taxes, but you hit on a couple of things like cost of transportation, the cost of the union contracts with respect to our emergency services. Salaries go up, and and those all go through negotiated contracts. So I think at the end of the day, when you look at the services that we get and the costs to the community in the town of Georgina, I think we're getting a fair shake from the region. We always want to get a little bit more. We want to get the Sutton plant expanded so that we can do more work in Sutton, but it all happens over time.
Okay, so we've only got a minute left here. So very quickly, Georgina's increase will add about $21 to an average home of $400. The increase at York Region will add another $40. Just quickly, did you support this increase at York Region? Did you vote for it?
Yeah, I questioned it, but after seeing what happened at the town of Georgina, I supported it. I think it's important that those services be enhanced and retained. And over the course of time, you got to deal with whatever the cost.
Rob, I have to cut you off. Please stay with us. We're going to take a few minutes, and we'll be right back with Regional Councillor Rob Grossi, and we'll be talking about our relationship with York Region. Welcome back. My name is Karen Wolfe, and I'm here with Regional Councillor Rob Grossi, and we're talking about our relationship with York Region. So, Rob, one of the things that I looked through the budget, and I'm just, you realize that the availability of affordable housing here in Georgina has been described as a crisis. And I'm just wondering if there's anything in that budget that will help us address that issue. If there's anything you saw that's going to help us here in Georgina.
Well, Karen, it's not only in Georgina, it's across York regions, across the province of Ontario, that they found that there's a housing shortage. And I think if recently they identified that the housing shortage, I'm not sure what the numbers were, but it's huge. In the last, people in the town of Georgina have probably realized greatly that in the last couple of years, the market in Georgina has gone crazy. There's been houses that, it seems like now it's the $599, list for $599 and see what it sells for. There was a house just last week that was listed for $599 and sold for $815,000. And it was only a converted cottage in Willow Beach. So there's a lot going on as far as affordability. And, and it wasn't that long ago, Karen, where you heard people complain about developers, and you heard people complain about developing too quickly. And yet people were arriving in this country, arriving in this town, and they needed a place to live. And I think we did pretty good, going back 20 some odd years, the development of South Keswick and identifying it as a growth area and trying to balance between housing that would be, townhouse versus single family dwellings. I think we did okay, but all of a sudden it's exploded because there isn't the volume of housing available. There has to be a coordinated response, including the federal government, the province of Ontario, and let the municipalities do whatever we need to do. Often what happens is the Ontario Municipal Board, the tribunal, gets in the way, costs us thousands of dollars to try to move forward because we're trying to do what we can to make sure that there's affordability in housing, and yet we get pushback from other levels of government when they're supposed to be our partners. So there has to be some coordinated effort. And I think what I've always found in the past, and you can probably attest to this, partnerships are what work the best. If you try to do it on your own, and we don't have the tools to do it by ourselves, if we have the proper partners in place, often things can happen because they have the ability to make things happen.
Well, I mean, when I looked at the budget, I think I saw that there was a plan in place that York Region would build 700 affordable housing units in York Region within the next 4 years. Anything going to come to Georgina out of that plan?
Well, originally, we looked at, and I had a couple of people who were very interested in going to the Link property and doing something there. Usually it requires a partnership. There's a multi-story triple tower property in behind Swiss Chalet that would be, I'm not sure how affordable anything is going to be going forward, but there's proposals to do things like that. And I mean, just look at the building and the opposition that we had on the building on the Queensway when it was built years ago. But that has helped fill a gap. I would love to see some changes. I think in my lifetime I might see some multi-story buildings somewhere in this municipality that serve the needs of affordable housing. But affordability, I mean, just to define affordability today is difficult. I mean, at the Region of York, they'll tell you that an affordability, I think it was somewhere around $850,000. I don't know too many young people today that can afford a house, even with $100,000 down payment.
I would agree. I probably couldn't afford to buy my house right now if I had to. Okay, so I know that you were adamantly opposed to the Upper York sewage solution. And, York Region has spent something like $715 million on the design of that project. And it was sent back to the province for them to make a decision on the environmental assessment. And that hasn't been done. And that environmental assessment was done in 2011. So maybe you can bring us up to date on the status of the project and what you would like to see happen going forward.
Yeah, so I think the 700 million is that's what the total build of might be. What they've spent so far is substantially less than that, maybe $100 million or whatever. There's land acquisition and there's the environmental assessment, everything else associated with that. So, as far as the Upper York sewage solution, my position hasn't changed from what it was 10 years ago or 3 years ago when I ran for this position. When I was first elected to regional council in 1994 and going forward from there, the solution for East Gwillimbury, Newmarket, and Aurora was always the southern solution to go down to Duffin Creek. And it didn't change for many years. And that was because the university was going to be in Queensville. A lot of growth was going to occur in Queensville, which is happening now. And the solution was to go south. And at the time, much of the infrastructure that was built in the southern part of the region was sized to accommodate that growth, whether it was down 16th Avenue or somewhere through Markham and through Durham. It was sized for the purposes of handling the growth within East Gwillimbury, Newmarket, and Aurora. And then in the 2000s, that's when the province of Ontario said to the region of York, we want you to look for another solution. And that solution would be a Lake Simcoe solution. And I can remember at the time saying, well, Lake Simcoe compared to Lake Ontario is like a thimble in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. How can you look at Lake Simcoe, considering the challenges that were present with all the different communities surrounding Lake Simcoe and the pressures with respect to development and the expansion of their official plans and everything else? So I was opposed to, and I'm still opposed to, the Upper York sewage solution. I think that 40 million liters of treated sewage per day in phase one of the Upper York. You got to realize there's 3 phases to the Upper York sewage solution. 40 million liters of treated sewage per day into the Holland River. If anybody knows the Holland River, it's a shallow river. Into Cooks Bay, shallow bay. A guy by the name of Lloyd Crate invited me for a boat ride when I was first elected mayor years ago, and he said, "Hey, Rob, I want you to come out in a boat with me." I said, "Okay." So we went out, and he took me down to the southern part of Cook Bay, and he said, "Look at all the weeds and the growth and everything here." He said, "When I was a kid, I used to swim here, and now because of the different environmental issues, phosphorus, whatever, it's changing dramatically." I just don't believe in the Upper York sewage solution the same way other people believe in it.
Okay, so do you think then that, the failure to approve a waste management solution for York Region, and I mean, it's sat around since 2011, not making a decision one way or the other. So do you think that inability to make a decision has had a negative impact on the housing supply, and that's added to our housing costs?
I don't think it has yet, but it's getting pretty close. You look at all the development that's happened in East Gwillimbury. It's happened on the existing services that are there. Same with Newmarket. Newmarket doesn't have much more room to grow anyways. So I think, really what it is, it's the plan for the next 20 years, 30, 40 years, and the servicing that they're going to need for the growth there. So I think we're at the crossroads of where those services need to be put in place. I just don't believe that the solution is Lake Simcoe. I've been here all of my life as either a cottager and the last 35 years as a permanent resident. And Lake Simcoe has so many different challenges. All you got to do is look over at Innisfil and see the plans for Orbit, which is 100,000 more people on the shores of Lake Simcoe. Where's their wastewater going to go? And I get it. Technology is, greater today than it was, but all you need is one major failure and your technology goes out the window.
Okay, I'm going to take a different approach here. And I want to talk about some of the discussions that have been ongoing about amalgamating our fire services. Okay. Where are you at?
Amalgamating our fire service. Boy, you're going all over the place here. Amalgamating our fire services. Whenever you can provide a better service to the constituents in your community by doing something different than what exists today, I don't have a problem. And I mentioned a little bit earlier about tiered response. So if it makes more sense for us to work with and amalgamate services, it was, Aurora and Newmarket, there was a lot of pushback when they created Central York years ago. I think, frankly, it works pretty well today. The only issue that we have in the town of Georgina is geography. We have a large rural area. It's great to see a new hall in Pefferlaw that services that community, but geography, is what costs us because we have to provide those services to numerous communities. So if we can amalgamate services, I'm just afraid sometimes that when it comes to the cost of those services, they always go up. When they did Toronto originally and they amalgamated Toronto, they said it was going to flatten out. It didn't. The price and the cost of providing that services, and that was your opening question when it comes to taxes. When you amalgamate services, sometimes it's a little bit more money.
So have you looked at this to come up with an opinion one way or the other, whether we should do it or we shouldn't?
Well, it's been on the table probably 5 times in the last 15 years. So if I looked at it lately, there hasn't been a serious study that has taken all of the variables into consideration. Would I, we provide mutual aid to, and if it wasn't that long ago, Karen, when East Gwillimbury had a total volunteer fire service, yet they had probably some of the largest commercial developments on Green Lane. And when they had a situation that occurred in East Gwillimbury, we were the one that responded. I remember there was a big fire on Ravenshoe, on the south side of Ravenshoe. And we got there. We would often get to those calls before East Gwillimbury could even get their volunteers together.
Okay, so that's something we should maybe take a look at as we go forward. Sure. So in the 2022 budget, there was a 3.3% increase approved actually for water and wastewater. But Georgina approved an increase of, I think it's 5.84%. Just want to know, why there's such a wide margin of increase here between York Region, especially when York Region provides us with a lot of that service.
Well, it comes down to York Region gives us, and we pay for the major infrastructure. We pay for the final portion, and we have the pumping stations and all that infrastructure to bring those services to the taps of the people that we serve in the town of Georgina. It's just a product of the cost of providing those services at the end of the day, whether it's the salaries or whether it's the infrastructure itself. The rural people in the town of Georgina don't pay. They pay their own maintenance of their well. They pay for their whatever other services that they, water softening, whatever else they want. So those that are on the services, they're paying a little bit more, but that's the cost of doing business when it comes to providing.
No, but I think the question is like, why are we paying so much more, or why is the increase so much more in Georgina than it is at York Region, when I've always led to believe that York Region is supplying the service to us? Are we, just
because it's a two-tier system. They provide it to us, and then we have employees, we have the infrastructure, our local infrastructure that's in place that we have to pay for to bring the water into the taps. They provide us the water to those stations, and then from there. So it is. To be honest, I'm not sure what the final outcome was, but I would think that it's probably has to deal with infrastructure costs and the costs of salaries for water wastewater. And there's money being set aside for improvements to the system. You can't just sit with the system without making sure that you've got money set aside for the infrastructure going forward. If you don't, then you end up in a catastrophe later on.
So some of that money obviously has been put aside to save up for whatever, catastrophes we might end up with.
Reserves. Yep.
Okay, great. Listen, don't go too far away. We will be back again with Regional Councillor after we take a break. Thank you, and don't go too far away. name is Karen Wolfe, and I'm here with Regional Councillor Rob Grossi, and we're talking about Georgina's relationship to York Region. So, Rob, a few years ago, I remember York Regional Police decided that they were going to close their office on Baseline Road in the evenings, and they were going to put another officer on the road. How has that worked out?
Good question. If I haven't heard anything back negatively, so I guess that question is probably better suited to the District 3 commander, but we haven't heard negative comments with respect to that service.
Because I thought that, they were going to report back on just how that was working out. They felt that, the service level would have increased by putting another officer on the road because they weren't getting that much business, I guess, at the office there. So I thought they were going to report back to you on Regional Council to let you know how that was working. But I haven't seen it. I know McSween, Chief McSween came and did report, gave us an update, but there wasn't anything specific to three district. I think whenever you can put more people on the road, though, that's what people want. They want to know that there's policing available within their community, especially the rural parts of Georgia. Okay. Now, you talked a little bit about the link, and we talked about York Region's use of that facility. And I understand that the York Region Health actually is coming into that facility. I mean, that's a facility that's cost us almost $9 million, which is significant. I'm kind of happy to hear that York Region is going to be utilizing it with York Region Health. What kind of services will they be offering our residents out of there?
So, look at that building, look where it is, look at the cost of real estate today. And yes, it's cost us some significant dollars, but at the same time, look at the kinds of services that are there today as compared to where we were 5-10 years ago. You have Hospice Georgina, you have Jericho, you have a first-class kitchen facility. York Region's bringing in all of their services. Ontario Works, dental screening, they're bringing all sorts of stuff into that facility. So it's at your doorstep. We always in the past argued, why is it that we can't get services within the town of Georgina from the region of York? Well, there they are. They spent, I'm not sure what the final figure was, but it was a couple of $1 million that the region is spending just to upgrade the space there and then provide those services. Now, some people in Keswick will argue, well, that should be in Keswick. Somehow you've got to try to provide those services as best you possibly can. So there are a number of services. I don't have the specifics of the services, but I know that there's a lot of different regional services that are provided there. Baby and me and breastfeeding and all that sort of stuff will be provided there, which normally would have been provided somewhere else within the region, at the regional center, perhaps behind Tim Hortons in Keswick, at that facility, some of those services that will still be provided there. But so it's a multitude of services that are going to be the link.
That's good. Actually, that's a very positive story, I think. So let's talk a little bit about high-speed internet. And I was around back in 2004, 2005, when Georgina supported South Shore broadband technology that eventually went bankrupt, and Georgina ended up assuming all of the assets from that particular company. And from what I understand, there's probably around 10 subscribers still on that broadband technology. And, a lot has happened and a lot since then in terms of providing high-speed internet. And I'm just wondering, do we continue to support this broadband technology, or do we let the market forces take off? Or specifically because York Region right now is delivering dark fiber to a lot of communities in Georgina that don't have access to high speed. So, do we continue supporting broadband?
Well, I think if you're true to yourself as an elected official, you rely on the expertise of people in different departments to provide you the information that's necessary to make those decisions. And at the time, I think it was a right decision to do some of the broadband work that we did to make sure that we tried to bring in services to some of those rural communities. mean, in some other areas, your connections were fabulous. As we move forward with the kind of work that's being done by the region, and you got to remember, the work that's being done in the region is money that's coming from the federal government in a lot of different ways, some of it from the provincial government. As soon as you've got those levels of government dealing with an issue of providing those kinds of services, then, if it means that we have to do something different, we still have the towers, we still have the infrastructure. If we have to change course, then change course and get with the times and make sure that you provide those people with the services that they require. So I don't have any problem with the decisions that we made at the time, but, there used to be 2-lane roadways and now there's 4-lane roadways.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm wondering whether or not we continue to, pour money into the broadband when in fact the free market is providing those services now.
Well, at some point in time, we'll have that analysis done and then make that decision.
Yeah. Okay. Again, we're going to switch lanes.
Okay.
And we are going to talk about the Bradford bypass. And again, we know
Just build it.
I was going to say, I think we know you're in favor of that particular piece of infrastructure, yet the critics want the environmental assessment updated. And I'm just wondering, what objection you have to do that.
Well, Karen, you know that the 404 would not be anywhere near the southern border of the town of Georgina if those same people had their way with respect to the 404. The Bradford bypass should have been built 25 years ago. And the 404 should be running up into Durham right now. Because in the 50s, the whole idea was to provide two means of connection to Northern Ontario. One was the 400, the other was the 404. All of our official plans, all of the growth that's taken place in the town of Georgina over the last 30 years was predicated on the province of Ontario saying, we're going to build you a connection between the 400 and the 404. It's going to be called the Bradford bypass. The work was done, and as far as the environmental assessment, and yes, the argument can be made that they need to update the environmental assessment. Our MPP has told us through the province of Ontario, she is the Minister of Transportation, that all of that work will be done to make sure that the environment assessment is done. When they start talking about salt, yeah, I have the same concern as everybody else when it comes to the effect of any road on Lake Simcoe. But there's a balance there between what our needs are and what our wants are. And how do you do that? And how do you deal with growth? We need the Bradford bypass. We need to have that connection. It was supposed to be here 25 years ago. Let's just get it built. And at the same time as we're doing it, let's deal with those environmental issues. But it's a cat and dog thing. You gotta give a little bit to get a little.
Okay, so we know where Rob Grossi is on this. Where is the region of York on it? I haven't heard anything coming from them.
The region of York is very much in support of the Bradford bypass. If you talk to anybody in the elected officials in East Gwillimbury or Newmarket, they understand that if you want to get east to west anywhere in York region, north of the 407, just try it. Take Highway 9. Is Highway 9 supposed to be a highway? It was Davis Drive and they changed its name to Highway 9. Why? Just because it's still Davis Drive. You still have to stop. You still, and if you want to get from here over to Bradford or over to the 400, what do you have to do? You have to go south, get on Queensville Side Road, take Queensville Side Road to Bathurst Street, take Bathurst Street. You know what I mean. Yeah,
okay. So, East Gwillimbury, we're talking about growth and just what, that means to us. As far as infrastructure is concerned. And right now, East Gwillimbury, I heard, is welcoming a new corporate entity that is going to build a massive distribution warehouse there. And I know that Georgina actually has already been alerted to a similar issue here. Or development, I should say. What are some of the positive impacts that this type of economic delivery can bring to a municipality?
Come on down. I mean, I think that we should be way more aggressive when it comes to economic development. I think we should be, go down to the 401 where the exit is, and it says 404 Newmarket, cross out Newmarket and put Keswick, because we're a destination. We've got land available. We've had the business park in place. When I ran 10 years ago or whatever, and I talked about the blueprint. The blueprint's been there, and we're in competition with 443 other municipalities in the province of Ontario. So I welcome what's happening in East Gwillimbury. And if there's anybody who watch this program that wants to invest in the town of Georgina, phone me, or phone the Economic Development Department. We need those kinds of jobs in this community. And you know what, really, and I mentioned earlier, we need partnerships. Why isn't the province of Ontario looking at, helping us out? They didn't move the Transportation Department to St. Catharines without some political will from somewhere. They didn't move OHIP to Kingston without some political will somewhere. Move the Ministry of the Environment or Natural Resources, put an outpost in the business park dealing with water, maybe. Water is going to be a very important commodity in the next 25 years, not only here, but across the world. Why couldn't we have a water center of excellence on Woodbine Avenue? And think of all the reciprocals. But we have to sell ourselves. We have to get down there, we have to knock on doors. And those people that represent us both provincially and federally, I think they sort of owe this community something, in helping us get to the next stage. And sometimes, Karen, it isn't about, you need to have it. It's about working with those people in partnership to make things happen in your communities. And that's what happens in other communities. It should happen here.
Yeah. So, there's a plus side, the jobs, and I'm sure, the taxes that we'll be able to collect as well from developments like that. But, do you think that there are any negative impacts with, do you think Northern York region then, could become the mega distribution capital of our York region? And, does that bring with it any kind of negative impacts?
Sure, it does. It always does. There'll be more transportation need within our infrastructure. There will be some of those kinds of issues. But you know what? What my answer would be, come on down. If you want to build a new Canadian Tire distribution facility at the corner of Ravenshoe and Woodbine, I'll be there shaking your hand and doing whatever I need to do. So you know what? In the world today, but the pandemic has changed a lot of things, as far as the provision of services. You don't necessarily have to be physically in one place unless you're Amazon, but you can answer the phone for the town of Georgina sitting in your home and then provide those services to the community that way without having to be in a physical space. But that's a whole other story.
Well, sure. I mean, these are distribution centers like Amazon and could very well be because they haven't identified who this corporate citizen is. Yeah. But, we would need a better road system for that kind of industry to kind of come into Georgina and transportation system, what have you. Getting at transportation again, let's talk about the transit system here, the public transit system. How satisfied are you with the York Region public transit system that we have here?
Well, you usually gauge the satisfaction of a system based on the kind of response you get. For the most part, having the transportation system that exists, having some of the other systems like routes and the kind of work that they do and the dial-a-ride, all of those things, I think it's actually not working too bad for a rural area. And I just go back, we're still a rural area in many ways, and you're not going to have, they're not going to extend the subway to Pefferlaw. That ain't going to happen.
Okay, well, we'll have to live with that one, I guess. Don't go too far away. We will be right back with Regional Councillor Rob Grossi, and we'll be talking about York Region. Stay with us. Welcome back. My name is Karen Wolfe, and I'm here with Rob Grossi, our Regional Councillor, and we're talking about our relationship with York Region. So, Rob, you're obviously aware that, Georgina has been struggling to develop a waterfront strategy. to address the issues that come with us being a lakeside community. And, given that Georgina is York Region's only waterfront area, do you think they should offer us some support in this area?
Oh, that's a good question. Should they be offering us, you're talking probably monetary support with respect to, I'm not sure. We don't offer monetary support to other municipalities in York Region. We don't, other than.
Of course, the money.
Pardon me?
In the money that we send York Region, that's distributed to the other municipalities for whatever there might be.
Yeah, but we don't send money to Canada's Wonderland unless you buy a pass. We don't send money to other amenities, tourist amenities across the region of York, specifically to the municipalities. But we can argue that. I think as far as the waterfront, we've tried, but it's a challenge in the town of Georgina. I was very happy with with the purchase of the Sador property. That we did. I was happy that we negotiated. People don't realize this, but North Gwillimbury Park had been sold by the town of Georgina to developers years ago. We negotiated that back. I'm happy that we did the Keffers property and bought that and rehabilitated that. I'm happy that we purchased the balance of the Delaselle property years ago. So we do have some assets. I'm disappointed that the Sador property is encumbered now by a lease for farming. I mean, I understand it and I get it, but that was only supposed to be a temporary relationship. It wasn't supposed to encumber that property. That's a key piece of property in the municipality because we don't have the same luxury as the Aurelias or the Berries having a large amount of lakefront property. So do we have to do better as far as the lakefront? Yeah. Do we is the waterfront strategy working? I'm not sure. Sometimes you just have to make some decisions without having an outside service provide you a strategy. I don't think that York Region necessarily has to be a contributor to our waterfront strategy.
Okay, let's talk about the Skills Trade Institute. I mean, it's kind of linked a little bit there. It's a subsidiary of the Georgina Trades Training Institute, and it recently suffered a setback when they were advised that they were not going to be funded in 2022 by the provincial government. Is there anything that Georgina or York Region Council can do to, say, lobby the provincial government to reconsider that decision?
Well, I think Georgina made a huge commitment already, and we're going to have to pull back on that. Is there something we can do? Well, the people that are. Pardon me?
I say, is there something that Georgina / York Region can do to lobby the province to reconsider that decision?
I'm sure we could. I'm not sure what the intricacies of the decision and why they were made. We have a member of council who sits on the GTTI board. We have a member of our economic development department who sits on the board of the GTTI. They haven't said anything other than the press releases that we saw. Is there something? I believe, and the reason why we invested in the GTTI in the beginning was to make sure that there was an opportunity for people in this community to get skilled trades. And so I still believe in that. And if there's something that we can do to change people's minds, but I'm not sure what happened for them to make the decision that they made.
Okay, we've only got a few minutes left. And so very quickly, I've got a couple of questions. Number one, would York Region be willing to send a letter to our MP and to the Minister of Transportation about the aerodrome?
Well, without question. Sure. It's a fill site. It's not an aerodrome, and we know that. And so if we require, or if we want York Region to do that, I'm sure we could do that. No problem.
Wonderful.
Do work on that, by the way.
So you are you're celebrating 25 years in municipal politics this year?
24.
24 this year, okay.
Yeah, my hair was black when I started.
So if you were asked to provide some advice to a would-be newbie candidate, what's one of the first things you would tell them?
I would tell them that
and I'm asking
Pardon?
I'm asking for a friend.
Oh, you're asking for a friend. Yeah. I would tell them, you know what, I would create a vision. When I started, I had no knowledge whatsoever. And I've always said over the last few years that, I'd love to find someone who I can mentor, help them out a little bit going forward. It's about serving your community. You're not always going to be on the right side of the fence. You're going to have to make some decisions. People are not going to like you at times. People are going to stop you in grocery stores and say bad things to you. But you know what? I would tell that person that if they're interested, and I think it's really important that young people, I'm 68.
Okay, I have another question that we have to get to.
Okay. I would say to them, stay focused, and if you're involved in your community, then let people know you're interested in it and give them your vision.
Okay. So we all know that there's an election coming up this year, and I think it's important for us to know what you plan to do. Are you running for re-election, and if so, what position?
Well, great question. I've had a little bit of a discussion with my family as far as going forward, and I'm going to give you a great political answer. I don't know. I love being able to serve the people of the town of Georgina. I've had some great response from the people that I serve over the years, and I would be happy to serve in any capacity.
Okay, well, listen, I want to thank you so much for being with us. That's all the time we have. And I want to thank our audience for staying with us as well. Please come back and visit us again.
Time goes too quick. Thank you.